truly a schus to be able to make a video for Yedidim, an incredible organization that does so much for the youth of Eretz Yisrael. And they should continue to see Hatzlacha and go michoyel choyel. You know, Simcha is literally at the front lines of the success of an individual. If a person is able to live a life of Simcha, to have Simcha Sachayim, that's really critical. And there's not just a nice idea. We know from many different Chazal, and certainly the pasuk in the Tochach on Parshas Kisavo, Tachas Hashelo Avatas Hashem Lokecha B'Simcha V'Tuv Leva, of the fact that this all unraveled because you didn't live and do mitzvos b'simcha. You didn't live a life of simcha. You didn't appreciate the kindnesses of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It all unraveled. And a Jew, basically, it doesn't work if we don't feel simcha. If there's Hashem b'simcha, it's a fundamental principle. For our children, for our youth, teenagers, simcha really comes from feeling good about yourself, from having a sense of self-esteem, from feeling accomplished, from feeling from the most important people in their lives. And right now, certainly parents, we can't control every Rebbe in the classroom and every Morah in the classroom. We can't control every philosophy of every school. But we can't control our environment within our homes. And it is absolutely critical that the environment in our homes has to be that your success and my love for you and my affirmation of your qualities and your beauty and your unique nature has to be there. It has to be there consistently, and it cannot depend on any outside factors. We cannot get caught up in the educational system that, I guess, for better or for worse, is the reality of the times. Certainly we can see great success from it, but we know there are also many failures in our educational system. And the academics and the emphasis on academics has left many kids feeling inferior, and the results of that are devastating. So we have to really look to find a way to give our kids a sense of excitement and of purpose and of self-esteem, just simply because of who they are. An incredible pasuk that Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz points out by the Akedah, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Avrohom Avinu, Kachas bincha. Well, which Kachas bincha? I don't know which son. I have two sons. Kachas yichidcha. I still don't know which two sons. Each one's a yachid to their respective mothers. One's to Sarah, one's to Hagar. I still don't know who you mean, Yechidcha. That doesn't tell me. Asher Hafta, the one that you love. Avram Avinu responds, Rashi brings it, I still don't know who you mean. I love them both. You love them both? You have a Yishmael and you have a Yitzchak. You have a Nachas machine that literally doesn't stop producing unbelievable actions and mitzvos and avodas Hashem, and you have Yishmael, and you're going to tell me you love them both? And the Medrash is even clearer. The Medrash says that Avram Avinu said, I don't have a measuring rod on my loins to know who I love more. I love them both. And therefore, finally, HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs to say, no, take Es Yitzchak. The famous Hakedah Yitzchak, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu defined the son that he must take, of course, Yitzchak. It's an incredible Rashi. It shows us that the love that a parent has for a child cannot be dependent upon the parent-teachers conferences. It can't be dependent upon the report card. It can't be dependent on whether or not you go extra learning. And again, even it's maybe it's another conversation, but even when we have children who go with the extra learning and it's fantastic in there, we have to be very, very careful that they're not going for the wrong reasons. They could be going because of peer pressure, but if they're not going with a smile, they're not going with excitement, they're not going with a sense of exuberance, they're going because they have to, then there's something wrong. If a child doesn't smile, if a child is sort of morose and overly serious, that's not a healthy sign. We need kids who smile. We need kids who are happy. We need kids who have a feeling that my parents love me regardless of who I am. Very famous story, an educational story about Gary. Gary was a kid, let's say he was in 5th grade, and basically he was a terror. And he basically ripped apart the school every single day. And his regular set place was in the principal's office. And one day he gets called in the principal's office. Gary gets spoken to. He goes home the next morning. He comes back to school. From that day on, I think it was in March, that day on, Gary was a perfect student. And no teacher could believe it. He turned around literally in one day. and he started behaving impeccably. And he started doing well in school. He had started having a good attitude. What happened? You went from the worst kid in the school to one of the best kids in the school. And at the end of the year, they asked the principal, what did you say to Gary in that office? What happened? And the principal said, I don't really remember what I said. It was a typical Gary conversation. To which they said, we'll go to Gary. We'll ask him. And they went to Gary and they asked him, what did the principal say to you? And he said, it was a pretty typical conversation, but I remember one thing he said. I remember that when I was talking to the principal, the intercom went off and the secretary says, Mrs. Schwartz is on the phone. She wants to speak to you. And the principal answered, tell her I'll call her back. I'm talking to somebody very important. And Gary starts walking home after the conversation. I'm talking to somebody very important. That's me. The principal thinks I'm very important. And that statement, that one statement literally made an indelible imprint upon Gary's persona and his perspective, and that changed him around. Now, sometimes it can work. I don't know if it works to remind our kids every day that they're very important, but they have to feel that we're important. They have to see it in the way we look at them, the way we interact with them, the way we look for opportunities to have them feel good and to be excited and to have the simchas chayim. Again, they might not be interested necessarily in Gemara, or maybe they're interested in Gemara, but they're interested in other things. And if we don't validate those feelings, and we don't allow them, obviously in a permissible fashion, things that are permissible, but if we don't sort of embrace their qualities, embrace their quirks, and see them in this way for who they are and what they are, it's going to leave them with a negative sense. And then, unfortunately, Yedidim has to be called in. And I think Yedidim would be extremely happy never to be needed again. I think this is an organization that would love to have to disband, because every kid in Klal Yisrael is doing amazing. Every kid in Klal Yisrael doesn't need an older brother, or a big brother, or a big sister. Okay, although we don't see that happening anytime soon, so they should continue their amazing work. But it shows us that this is within our purview. We can have this relationship. We just, as I'm making this recording, it's Pashas Emor. And the pasuk says, Emor el kohanim v'marta aleim. So there's a double language, Emor v'marta. And Rashi picks up on it. Why do we have a double language when Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching the Kohanim all the laws of being a Kohen? Why Emor v'marta? And Rashi says, Lahazi gedol malakatanim. And to warn the elders about the need for the youngsters to keep these laws. And the kasha that I saw asked, very, very basic question, why here? I mean, every mitzvah in the Torah has the responsibility of a parent to tell their children. Why dafka here by the Kohanim does it say Emor v'marta lahazir gedol malakatanim? We could have picked any mitzvah for this message. And a beautiful answer I saw is because every mitzvah really doesn't need a strengthening of lahazir gedol malakatanim. When you're in a community and things are taken for granted, that everyone keeps Shabbos and everyone keeps kosher and everyone learns Torah and whatever, it's back in the good old days when life was much simpler. Well, you didn't have to have a special warning. It was sort of part of the fabric of the environment that people grew up from in our community. But now, but being a Kohen, that's a different story. When little Yankel the Kohen wants to play soccer, and he can't because a soccer field is near a cemetery, and the father says, you can't play ball there because you can't play soccer because the cemetery's there, or you can't do this because you have other responsibilities. You can't go to become tameh because you're Kohen and you eat truma. There, when the kid feels I'm being asked to be different, that requires a special lahazir gedol malkatanim. That requires special emphasis. In today's world, we are certainly asking our children to be different. We are in a world where it's literally the entire world is one little village. We know what's going on everywhere. And these kids know, as much as we want to shelter our children, they know exactly the differences between our lives and the secular world's lives. They know what they're giving up. They know full well what they're giving up. If we are asking them to be different, we have to lahazir. That doesn't just mean to warn. It means to find the words to make them feel we're special. When we do things differently than the rest of the world, it's because we're special, because we're given a mission, because we have a great mandate. And that mandate allows and needs to be incorporated to every child. That mandate does not mean that you're going to be necessarily a Talmud Chacham or Rosh Yeshiva. That mandate is that you have unique qualities that could be used to serve Klal Yisrael, to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It could be in so many different ways. We see it. We see how many people have changed the landscape of Klal Yisrael, not through the mechanism of learning Torah, through different acts of chasadim, through different ingenious kinds of plans and ideas to how to help people, how to help Klal Yisrael in so many different ways. If we have that kind of child who maybe the classroom is not meant for that particular child, but there's so many other contributions they can make. If they have talents, if they have, whether it's music, artistic, whatever, you name it, so many different talents, all that can be used in a positive way. All of that has to be celebrated. All of that has to be given that special quality of that's unique, that's you. And we love you. Not because you do this, not because you do that. You're our child, we love you. That has to be given over. And you can be a Yishmael, as mind-boggling as that might appear, okay, now that's Avrohom Avinu, okay, he was able to muster equal love for even Yishmael. But certainly, Baruch Hashem, we're not dealing with Yishmaels. We're dealing with wonderful kids who just sometimes don't necessarily follow the beaten path, don't necessarily thrive in the same ways other kids thrive. Well, maybe for whatever reason, have to be given support in another fashion. That's what we have to do. That's our mandate, to give that sense, that child a sense of simcha sachayim, feeling accomplished, feeling self-esteem, feeling they can do it. You know, when the Alter of Slobodka, when he spoke to Rabbi Yisrael Slanter about his vision and his mission in life, I believe it was the Alter, and the story might happen a number of times with different people, but the message was the same. When asked, what should my mission be? It's lahachos levikom, lahachos ruach shafolim. It's to lift up the downtrodden. It's to lift up people and young men and women who maybe, for whatever reason, are not sort of the stars, but they are stars. Our job is to make them feel, of course you're a star. You're not a star in the way that other person's a star. He's a star through his GPA, and she's a star by being valedictorian, but there are other stars. And we don't know who's going to make the biggest contribution in Klal. So we don't know who HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks down upon and says, my gosh, look at this incredible accomplishment. That's the message we have to give to our children, the sense of affirmation, of validation. I'll end with an amazing story that I heard a few years back. And it's a story about a fellow who's about to marry an Arab girl in Eretz Yisrael. And somebody said to the father, you know what, maybe take him to Rav Steimer's Zatzal. Maybe you don't know if he can give him some word that maybe you can turn him around, that he's ready to get married. But you know what? They offered him and he said, I'll go. Shockingly, he went. They went to Rav Steimer and they come to after Shachris, they come to the Stender and he says, how you doing? He says, Rebbe, not so good. My Ruchnius is not in a good place. He says, yeah, well, he explains to him about to marry a Gentile person, and he says, let me ask you something. Have you thought of doing tshuva any time in the last year? And he said, yes, I thought of doing tshuva 2 or 3 times in the last year. He says, wow, amazing. I'm jealous of your olam haba. I'm jealous of your spiritual state. What? Jealous of my spiritual state? About to marry a Gentile girl, and the Gadol Hadar tells me that I'm jealous of your spiritual level. So he says, yeah, because the Gemara says, no tzaddik can stand in the place of somebody who is able, even for a brief second, and even if in terms of it was a thought, but you thought in your mind about doing tshuva, that's a place, that's rarefied territory. I was never in that place. I can't put myself in your position. I never had the tests you had. And therefore, I'm jealous of your olam haba. I'm jealous of your spiritual level. And those words had such a profound impact. That the Gadol Hadar looks at me and sees me in my very, very low spiritual state and says he's jealous of me. He sees the beauty within me. He sees the greatness within me. Wow. And what's amazing is when they asked him, and he said, I'm not going through with the wedding. I'm not marrying this girl. And when they asked him, but what made you go to Rav Steinman? What made you, compelled you to go? And he said, What compelled me to go is the fact I remember in 4th grade, he came to our classroom. And I, of course, did not know any of the answers. And how interesting it is that the kid that didn't know any of the answers is the kid never with the challenges later on in life. And that's, again, because we're not giving these young men and women the feeling of specialness, of uniqueness, of contribution. And he came to the faher and he said that everybody gets a right answer, gets a candy. And he went around the class, he came to me, he asked me one question, and I didn't know the answer. Then he asked me another question, I didn't know the answer either. So he dismissed the class was over, and he asked me to stay after the class. And he comes over to me and he says, listen, he says, we don't give candy for the right answers. We give candies for trying. Everybody else tried once to come up with an answer. They were successful. I gave him a candy. You tried twice. I asked you 2 questions. You tried to answer them twice. I will give you 2 candies. Because we give candies for effort, not for results. And that little short 20-second episode, some 20, 25 years later in his life, it stayed with him. And it stuck with him. And he said to himself, that's a man I'm going to visit. I might be in a very low spiritual state. I'm going to go to see him. He went to see him and he turned his life around. These are amazing stories, but this is everyday life. These are situations we deal with every single day. We have to embrace every single child. We cannot get caught up in the value system of an educational system that does not push the virtues of different personalities and different talents. Again, I'm not here to criticize, but the reality is that when things are very competitive and we have A yeshivas for the A students and B yeshivas for the B students, and everything is sort of on a cutthroat, competitive level, it's not the way it should be, because it leaves karbonis, way too many karbonis on the side. But that's another story. In the meantime, we have our families, we have our home. The mother and the father are the ones who can create that special environment. Our kids need to feel love, they need to feel joy, they need to feel affirmation. B'ez Hashem, we can do that. We can see the great success that really every child is able to do for Klal Yisrael, the unique contributions that they can make. And B'ez Hashem, if we can do that and fulfill that mandate of living a life of simcha, of giving them that sense of self-worth, B'ez Hashem, lahazir gedol mal katan, to make them feel special. Yes, you're being asked to be different than the rest of the world, because today all Yisraelim, you don't have to be just a Kohen to be different. All Yisraelim are asked to be different than the rest of the world. But wow, what a mission, what a mandate, what a beautiful opportunity to be the Am Hashem, the Am HaNivchar, to be a Melechus Kohanim v'Koy Kadosh. B'ez Hashem, we should be successful in this great, great mission of being good parents, raising beautiful children. B'ez Hashem, we'll see nachas from all of them and go michayil l'chayil.